Welcome to the Pen to Publish podcast from the two Alexas. If you're planning to pen and publish or are penning at the moment, then you're definitely in the right place. We talk all about the writing and publishing process, and we know this podcast is helping hundreds of writers all over the globe. I'm Alexa Whitten, author, typesetter, and independent publisher. And
I'm Alexa Tewkesbury, author, editor, and proofreader. We have many writing resources for you, including our brand new Pen to Published website, where you can get all the show notes and guest information. We've interviewed some really interesting writers and authors, and there's also our Writers Refinery Facebook group, which is available for you to join. We love getting feedback, so do please leave us a review, and don't forget to hit subscribe so that all the latest episodes pop up in your podcast feed. So let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Series 6 of the Pen to Publish podcast. And today we have the wonderful Janey Burton, who I am delighted that's come to join us today. Now, Alexa Tewkesbury, you've introduced me to Janey because we've never met until today. So, Alexa, before I introduce Janey, do you want to just say how you two have met or how you work together?
Well, it's so far. I was just saying, actually, before we started recording, that most of the people I work with, I've never met them in person. I've never breathed the same airspace.
That includes us. That includes us.
Yes, we've never actually met face to face. We will. It'll happen. But no, Janey and I, being members of the Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading, I think probably via another member, Louise Harmby, who has a very active editing or Facebook page for editors, and we sort of met it there and started chatting there. And then Janey posts such really great content on her social media, so I started sharing, and it just kind of developed from there, didn't it? And then I think it was last year we swapped blog posts, and that was very exciting because I'd never done that before. So it's built up a kind of thing, and I just thought it'd be great to talk to you because of your very particular expertise.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Alexis. I'm very glad to be here.
Excellent. Right. Let me introduce Janey so people know who you are and what you do. So Janey is a publishing consultant, editor and contracts negotiator, and has been working in publishing in London since 2006. She's worked for literary agents, independent publishers, and at Penguin Books before setting up her own business. She now provides contract negotiations for authors not represented by an agent, as well as advising small publishers on their contract terms. Wow. So you've had a real smorgasbord of some really great experience with working with publishers as well. So I'm sure we'll be getting into how that has affected now what you do now. So Alexa T's got a great question coming up. But before we ask you, can you just explain what types of publishers there are? Because I know there's this big sort of myth around publishing and publishers and what they do. So could you just quickly describe for our listeners what traditional publishing is, what a hybrid publisher is, a vanity publisher is, and obviously self-publishing, a self-published provider? What do they all mean?
Yeah. Okay. So a traditional publisher, the classic kind of publisher, is the kind who acquires a package of publishing rights from the author. And in exchange for the right to, at their own expense, produce, publish, and sell the book in various formats and in various territories, they give the author in exchange an advance and/or royalties on book sales, and the proceeds from those book sales are the main source of their income. And then a hybrid publisher behaves in some of the same ways, in that they ask for exclusive publishing rights and provide royalties on book sales, but they split the risk and the reward with the author. So they ask for a financial contribution to the production costs from the author, and in return, the royalty splits are often much higher than you would get from a traditional publisher. So the author might get up to a 50% royalty on book sales compared to about 10% from a traditional publisher. So then a hybrid publisher's income is derived partly from author contributions and partly from the proceeds of book sales. Then you have assisted self-publishers and self-publishing service providers, and they don't acquire any rights from the author. They provide various services associated with publishing a book, like editing, or cover design or providing a distribution platform and such like. And their income is the fees for those services or a commission on sales. In self-publishing, the author is in control and takes on all the risk and responsibility of the publisher, but then that author-publisher will get, after they've paid their overheads, all the return on their book sales. So they don't have to split the proceeds with the publisher because they're the publisher. Then, of course, we have the unethical and scammy publishers, who are often known as vanity presses, and they're really the ones to avoid. They often present as a traditional publisher or a hybrid press. And so they acquire publishing rights from the author and also fees to cover the cost of production. But they really have no interest in trying to sell the books to retailers or readers. Their income is derived from the authors they gouge. And such book sales as they may achieve are often sales to the author of their own book.
Right. Okay. So I mean, I have a publishing company called Compass Publishing UK. So I'm really the one that you talked about, the self-published provider. It's difficult to say kind of what I am, because I publish the book under my imprint, but I don't assert any rights to the book whatsoever. So I don't do any of the marketing, I don't do any of the distribution, but I get the book to print, and I can get the book so far in online on bookshop online, but I can't get people usually in regular bookshops because I just don't have that power.
No, of course.
But all of the book sales and all of the cover price goes to the author. And if they decide they want to go somewhere else, they absolutely can.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Fees.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're a self-publishing service provider.
Yes. Okay. It's just, I've always wanted to know what the sort of vanity publishing was, but you've expressed that now, that vanity publishers take on this persona of a traditional publisher when actually they're not. They're just in it for the money, I'm assuming.
They really are. Yeah.
It's really interesting because I think self-publishing used to be pretty much exclusively vanity publishing. That's what it was known as, but it's in the last, what would you say, 10 to 15 years that self-publishing has really taken off in a completely different way, with authors sort of taking control.
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer really correct to call them vanity presses. It's just that's a word that was already in the lexicon kind of thing, and so people knew that it's got an association that you don't really want to be with a vanity press, which helps. It helps people who are trying to advise authors where, which companies to work for and which to avoid. It helps us to explain we don't like those ones because they're vanity presses, and what we really mean is they're scammers.
So before we talk about contracts specifically, I know you get asked all sorts of questions about different types of publishing, and because the internet's this minefield and there's a real danger of authors being scammed, can you explain what they should consider when they're trying to choose between those three things: the self-publishing service provider, the hybrid publisher, and the vanity press? Obviously avoiding the last one, but
yes, avoiding the vanity press.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that because you have these different routes to publication, it's important to be clear about what your goals are for the book. I mean, I think hybrid publishers and self-publishing service providers are actually providing different approaches to publishing, and so they're suited to different types of authors. So I would say the important thing when choosing the route you want to take is to be really honest with yourself about where your skills and your enthusiasm lies, and what your goals for the book are. So, for instance, if you're the kind of person that you want to publish in the long term, you're planning to write several books, and you have a strong vision for your publishing venture, and that will demand that you have complete creative control, and you want to choose the professionals that you work with, and you have very definite ideas about things like cover design and back cover copy, and you have a head for business and strategy, and you have an interest in marketing and driving sales, i.e., you have all the things a publisher needs to have, then the self-publishing, or these days it's called the independent author route, could suit you very well, and you may achieve sales to a wide audience. It's a lot of work, but you can definitely do it. If, on the other hand, your main interest is getting the story or the memoir that you've written, and that's important to you, into a printed book form and available, but you're not much interested in other aspects of publishing, or you're really only planning to write one book and you know your audience is likely to be small, and possibly it's mainly made up of your family and friends, or you've written a book that's in a very niche subject, so the audience is going to be quite small, then probably the best way to achieve an attractive, high quality printed book that you can give to your audience is to go to an assisted self-publisher or a good hybrid publisher.
Yeah, so I would say that, so then in particular, what are the dangers then if you do decide to go down the vanity press route? What are the dangers with doing that? If that's all you know, like perhaps you don't really know of the other providers that are out there. I get often asked a lot. People come to me going, I wish I'd found you sooner. And they've already printed their book. They're already tied into something. So what are the dangers using a vanity press, and how can you spot them?
The big danger is that because they've come across this company that sounds like it's a traditional publisher, and they're saying they're a traditional publisher or they're a hybrid press, and they're saying, well, this is the way we do it now, that you pay the money and we produce the book. They think they're being published in something close to a traditional way and by a legitimate publisher. And so they spend a great deal of money on what ends up being often quite a poor quality book. And then they find the only person who's buying copies is the author themselves. So that's going to be a massive disappointment and leave the author rightfully feeling scammed. And I think there is a lot of information on the internet now about the kind of publishers to avoid. But nevertheless, if you just Google how to get a book published, the top results are all sponsored ads from vanity publishers who are saying, we're taking submissions now, get your book published. And of course, if you're not very au fait with this industry, and you wrote a book about your family history or something, and you just want to get it out, then you think, well, that's clearly the people to go. And then they flatter you and tell you this is a great book and it will sell lots of copies and we're going to do a beautiful job and everything. And then they persuade you to give out lots of fees for press releases to journalists, and those press releases never go anywhere. It's difficult. I mean, I think we are all trying to get as much information out there about the vanity presses, but you can't save everyone. There are going to be people always who just didn't manage to get past the wave of adverts that is the first thing you encounter.
And I notice a lot of people that finally come to me it's the older generation who want to write their memoirs.
Yeah.
It's the older generation who want to leave a legacy for their family. They go on the internet because obviously that's what you do.
Yeah.
They kind of believe what they read right at the top because they don't realize it's an advert. They don't realize that the top 6 results are all ads. They click on that and then they're down that rabbit hole. And I've rescued a couple of people before where they've already spent thousands of pounds and got nowhere, and it's awful. And then I'm a little bit on the back foot because I kind of try and say, look, I'm not here to scam you. I'm here, but unfortunately, you're going to have to pay out again because the way my services work, you have to cover my fees. So you give a good tip here, I think, about where you can double check.
Yeah, real ways to check. So the quickest, dirtiest way to find out if the company you're looking at is a scammy one is to search the name of the publisher and put scam in the search box. So Austin Macaulay scam. Austin Macaulay is a well-known vanity press.
Yeah,
Right.
I've heard of them.
The first few results will often include lists of the most well-known vanity presses that are very much to be avoided. So that's worth checking. Those articles are worth checking as well. Then if the company you're looking at doesn't come up, or you're looking at a self-publishing service provider and you want to check that they're legit and they're on the up and up, then you can look at the Alliance of Independent Authors directory. Ally is a great resource. They have a lot of information and resources for independent authors. And they have this directory providing reviews of self-publishing services and assisted self-publishing packages. And I've got a link which I can give you to put in your show notes.
Great.
And then there's Writable. Writable is a blog run by a lady called Victoria Strauss, and she has been doing sterling work for many years, writing about the practices of scammy publishers and dodgy literary agents, and she names all of them and she explains exactly what's wrong with what they're doing. So that's a really good resource as well. And again, I've got a link for you.
Great. That would be wonderful. We'll definitely put those in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I hopefully now, listeners, you understand the difference. And like we always say, do your due diligence, right? But before you part with any money, and I think Rachel Rowland said this as well, no literary agent is going to ask you for money for reading a submission.
Yeah.
Right. Big scam alert when people start asking you for money. If you're going down the traditional route and you think you're getting a proper agent, no agent working in the traditional company is going to ask you for money to read your submission. Right. So that's another red flag right there. Thank you, Janey, for sort of really explaining what's out there. And as we always say, do your due diligence. Is before you pay a penny to anyone, look for books they've done, ask for testimonials is a really good way of also knowing whether or not they've done what they've said they're going to do, is get other customers to tell you how it was working with them. Right, I think we're going to go on to the juicy contracts now.
Yes, the contracts, because obviously this is, as a contract negotiator, you know so much more than we do on that side of things. So what are the basic contract terms that it's useful to know, and what do they mean?
Okay, so I think there's some big ones that every author who's looking at a traditional deal should definitely look at and understand. I mean, you should always read your contracts. I'm very strict about this. You must read your contract. But anyway, so the big ones that you definitely look at are the grant of rights, the reversion or out of print clause, and of course, you will always want to look at the advance, if there is one, and of course, the royalty splits. And you also need to check how the royalties are calculated. Now, one thing I should probably mention about rights is these are publishing rights. That it's the right to publish a book that is the thing that is being acquired by the publisher. It's the right to exploit the copyrighted material, the text of the book, in order to make money. So we're not talking about like fundamental rights or like human rights. And I think authors don't always understand this. They hear rights and they think, well, I don't want to give up my rights. You hear them saying, I want to be published, but I don't want to give up my rights. And it sounds appalling. And it's like they think, oh, if I give the publisher a right to publish my book, I'm going to be thrown in prison. It's not that deep. It's just the right to publish the book. So anyway, just to be clear, a traditional publisher acquires from the author the right to publish a book and make money from book sales in exchange for splitting the proceeds with the author. So in order for an author to actually hang on to their publishing rights and exercise them themselves, the author must be the publisher, i.e. they have to self-publish. If you're working with a traditional publisher, you are giving over some rights. Let's go on to the actual terms. The grant of rights is an explanation of the package of rights the publisher is wanting to acquire from the author, and it's almost infinitely variable. It will include the formats they want to publish in, such as hardback, paperback, ebook. It will also show the territories the publisher is entitled to sell in. So it could be throughout the world, or it could be only in the UK and Commonwealth, or it could be in the USA, and that will include or exclude Canada. It will also say which language they get foreign rights in. So it might be all languages or only English. And lastly, the term or the length of the contract, which can range from the full term of copyright, which is author's life plus 70 years, to a more limited period of time, so 10 years perhaps. Then you have the reversion or out of print clause, explains how the publisher decides that the book is now out of print. At which point, when the book is out of print, the publishing rights can be returned to the author. Historically, this was based on whether there was still demand for the book and whether it was still available for sale in practical terms. So they'd look at whether there's copies of the book remaining in the warehouse. But these days we have POD and ebooks, and the definition of a modern reversion clause should be based on whether the book really is still selling well. So when demand for it has dropped off, it can be considered out of print. Now, advance and royalties. If you're working with a small publisher, there probably won't be an advance, or there might be a small kind of good faith advance. It's not going to be something that really contributes to your living expenses. It's more just to show willing and support you a bit. Now, royalties used to be calculated as a percentage of the retail price, and that's nice because then the royalty per book sold is very clear. It's a percentage of the listed price on the book cover. But these days, books are discounted by retailers, and royalties are then often calculated on what's known as net receipts, which is usually the listed price minus the retailer's discount. And those discounts vary. So Amazon gets a different discount from Tesco or Waterstones. The level of royalty can be variable as well, depending on the publisher. And you can sometimes see an escalator where once you've sold 2,000 copies, say, then the royalty goes up from 10 to 12.5.
I would imagine, though, and I'm sure we're going to be asking this question later about negotiation, because obviously when you go into a big publishing deal, most authors just sign going, yes, I've got a publishing deal, this is awesome, and then they get a bit screwed.
I mean, this is my raison d'etre. I'm like, A, please read your contract. B, yeah, please negotiate your contract, or get someone who actually knows about publishing contracts to do it for you. And I don't mean your buddy who's like a tax lawyer or something.
Yes.
They won't know.
So one of the services you offer is contract negotiation.
Yeah.
We'd all like to think that the terms of a contract would be obviously in the best interests of the author. But if that were the case, presumably we wouldn't need negotiators. So what kind of problems do you see in publishing contracts that could present difficulties for the author somewhere along the line?
Most publishers, I would say, do have the best interests of authors, or at least of their books in mind. And I mean, many people who work in this industry went into it precisely because they love books and they want them to continue to be a viable form of media. And that is itself very much in authors' interests. I mean, publishing is not the industry to go into if your main motivation is something else like money, because you don't make much money in publishing and the margins are very thin. Publishers go under all the time. Publishing is a business. And it provides livelihoods for its staff. So, I mean, in order to make enough money to keep the lights on at a publishing house, it's not wrong for the publisher to try and maximize their earnings. And in order to do that, they need to be free to produce and sell the book in the way they believe will attract the right audience and so sell the most copies. We shouldn't assume that the author would necessarily know better than a publisher about how to produce and sell the book, because writing and publishing are different kinds of jobs and they require different skills. So it's not even slightly wrong for a publishing contract to appear to favour the publisher or give them the final say on publishing decisions. But this is why it's important to read the contract and to negotiate where necessary. So a problem I see in publishing contracts quite often is you have a modern grant of rights that includes ebooks and print on demand, but then that modernity has been left out of the reversion or the out of print clause. And the result there is that it's not clear how the book could ever be regarded as out of print. And then if the author finds that the book is not selling and wants to get their publishing rights back and maybe self-publish or give them to another publisher, they can't get their rights back, because how can we say that this book is out of print? That's the kind of thing that I would check on and try to resolve so that it's clear in the contract how the book is regarded as out of print.
Something I've in contracts that I've had in the past is it's not just the terminology and everything. It's the fact that it's written in this kind of it's like legal sort of language, and I think, why can't you just write this in plain English that anyone can understand? But I do think you need somebody who completely understands what that sentence if I was editing that sentence and they're so long, some of them, I'd chop them up and just to make them make sense.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, they're very repetitive, aren't they? It's because you have to be very precise about what exactly you are referring to at all times. And so you end up with this with this repetition and these very, very convoluted sentences. I mean, no, as editors, we would both say, "Oh, this sentence is a nightmare." But once you get the hang of it, and there is a movement towards a more plain English style. I've seen lots of contracts that are very kind of they're quite friendly, really. They're quite clear and plain English. But yeah, I'm afraid the legal language can trip a lot of people up. And that's why they don't read their contracts. It's because they're afraid of the not understanding the language. And so they just don't read it. That's why you need me. I am not afraid of contracts.
I think, or you read it and it might not actually make sense to you what you're reading, but you think, well, it's in my contract and it must be legal, so it must be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you mentioned earlier that, obviously publishers have to pay their way and pay their staff. So is it reasonable to negotiate an author's advance or their royalties? And what is the likelihood of it being changed to the benefit of the author? Because you do hear of some very low royalties, but then you do hear of some huge advances as well.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, the kind of advances you hear about that are really big, I mean, that's news. That's why you hear about it.
Yes.
The vast majority of advances are much more modest. And as I say, small publishers often won't offer an advance, or they'll offer a kind of nominal advance. I mean, as to negotiation, I mean, yes, negotiating your contract is a reasonable thing to do. And some negotiation is very reasonable and some requests are unreasonable. And I mean, again, this is why it's so vital that the person negotiating the contract knows what terms and levels are standard in the industry and how much more can reasonably be pushed for. And this is where there's value in having a literary agent or a contracts negotiator to represent the author's interests, because the negotiator or the agent will know whether the advance or royalty is standard for the publisher, for the type of book, and for the sales potential of the author. And they'll know whether they have a reasonable chance of getting more. And they can argue all of this without becoming fractious and contentious. So in many contracts that I see, the royalties are already at a standard level. So there may be no possibility of negotiating them higher, as that's already the best the publisher is going to be able to do. And if they're on the low side, there may or may not be a good reason. For instance, academic publishers, they offer lower royalties than trade publishers, and that's standard in their part of the industry. And so there won't be much wriggle room if you're working with an academic publisher. And then there are the kind of publishers who produce and develop high concept, beautifully illustrated books. I'm thinking like Dorling Kindersley and that kind of publisher. And then as part of the book, they commission a writer to produce the text. Now, they may offer very low royalties for that text, or they offer a flat fee for the work. And that's in that case that the valuable asset, the intellectual property, was produced by and belongs to the publisher already. So the work for hire is writing the text for those books, and that work for hire jobs pay less than an author who came up with the whole book should expect to receive. But broadly, if I'm negotiating a contract and I think there's room for advancement, I will make my argument for it. And if it's possible for the publisher to grant, they often will grant what we've requested.
There's no danger if you approach them and say, can we negotiate the price? There's no danger that they'll say, all right, then let's not just, we just won't do this at all.
If they did, that would be a big red flag and you should run.
Right. Okay.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So if people aren't willing to negotiate, then they haven't really got your best interests at heart at all.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
any publisher is going to welcome your questions, especially if you're a first-time author, because they know that authors don't really understand how the publishing industry works. How could they? They don't work in it. So they're very happy to answer questions. They will usually try to make what changes they can in order to make the author happy. There will be things they can't budge on, but they're unlikely to say, well, let's forget the whole deal just because you want something that they can't give you.
So in terms of paperwork, it's not just the author signing things. Sometimes an author may want an independent editor to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which basically that's a document that says that you as the editor won't pinch their story. Now, I've only been sent one once, and it was years ago when I hadn't long had my business, and I didn't really think about it back then, and I signed it and sent it back. But actually, how legally binding is an NDA?
Oh, NDAs are one of my little hobby horses as well. I have a whole blog post about this, which I send to people who want me to sign an NDA. Anyway, it goes into great detail about an NDA won't do what authors think it will. And so I explain in this blog post that my terms and conditions already cover confidentiality. I can't go around telling everybody your story or using it myself. And I explain it's not editors, agents, publishers who are the ones who are likely to plagiarize a book. And it's actually fine and it's good for the culture, in the absence of actual plagiarism, for lots of books and films and other forms of art to have similar elements in them. So just because one book has something about a chosen one in it and another one also has the same, that's okay. That's fine. That's not plagiarism. Nobody copied anyone. Well, NDAs themselves, they're the same as any properly constructed and valid form of legal agreement. They are legally binding and enforceable. Of course they are. but they don't prevent plagiarism by other writers from occurring, and they don't provide a better remedy for plagiarism than already exists under copyright law. And they aren't commonly used in the publishing industry. So trying to get an editor or an agent or a publisher to sign one basically announces that the writer is an amateur, likely an absolute beginner, certainly not familiar with the industry, and they haven't read up on it. And chances are then they haven't written something the industry would miss because they're a beginner. So I don't sign NDAs, and nor do agents and publishers. And to be really blunt, it isn't because in the absence of an NDA, these publishing professionals would steal someone else's story. They don't do that. It's because they're pretty sure the author doesn't have a story worth reading.
Now, there's
sorry to be blunt, but
there was
yes,
say the direct thing.
There was a book that I did read. I mean, it does. We can't say it doesn't exist, because it does exist.
Plagiarism absolutely happens. It's usually committed by other authors. There was Christiane Siriya. She was a massive plagiarist, came to light in 2019. As soon as it came to light, all her books that contained plagiarized material were removed from sale. She was asked for massive damages. It's completely destroyed her little scam. It's great.
So is there just not NDA clauses in any publishing agreement then?
No, there's no NDA clause as part of a standard publisher agreement, no.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Because a lot of, that is a common question we have in the group as well. And authors that I see too, they're afraid of putting their book idea out there because they're worried other people are going to come along and steal their idea. But it's like with anything.
Well,
it's across the board, not just with books. Music has it, right?
There's a lot of cross-pollination.
Artists have it. Writers have it, blog posts have it, social media creators have it. You can't stop it.
Well, yes, if you want to share your work with the world, with the market, you are at some point going to have to tell them what it's about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
In real terms, there is nothing original anymore. Everything is some version of something that has happened before.
Yeah, you just have to trust your story is of good enough,
fresh enough
stature, professional enough, and told in a way that hasn't been told before, that you get it out there anyway. So I work a lot self-publishing authors, obviously, and as an independent publisher as well, because I have my own imprint. And while some are happy to stay self-published, others would like to move to the traditional publishing route. Like they've got a couple of books out, they've done really, really well, and they think it's got legs to go under a traditional publishing route. In your experience, are traditional publishers interested in publishing previously self-published books? I mean, we've heard that they are, because the hard work's been done, and obviously traditional publishers are in the business of making money. Or is it better for an author to approach them while writing something new?
I mean, I would say that the stories you read again in the newspapers, these are news. When a previously self-published author gets taken up by a traditional publisher, it's quite rare. And it's often because that book was already selling incredibly well, and there was a lot of buzz and word of mouth about it. And so the publisher could see that there were still parts of the audience that hadn't got hold of the book yet, and they could make more money by delivering the book to that audience that the author wasn't able to reach alone. When it happens, it's because the book has already sold thousands of copies, and there's great potential for further sales, and it needs to be brought into the mainstream market, made available in bookshops and supermarkets and so on, which self-published authors often can't reach. So unless you're in the position where you've got that kind of great buzz and thousands of copies under your belt, better to be able to offer the publisher the first opportunity to publish a new work. And so, self-published authors who want to make the switch to traditional publishing should do so with something they have previously unpublished.
It's interesting, that first flood of sales, because the publisher who was the main publisher for my children's books, they underwent lots of changes, and they pretty much stopped children's publishing altogether. And I was particularly keen to try and keep one series going, and I had sent that out to several publishers, and some of the feedback I got was, we've missed that first flood, so we don't want to republish something that's already out there. There was a small publisher eventually that has republished it, but they said that, the first kind of flush of sales is gone, and so we don't want to take that on. And I hadn't even considered that when I was hoping that I could get it republished.
Yeah, well, I mean that is an important time for a newly published book, and the problem is if you have missed that period and there's no continuing build up of buzz and word of mouth, then it becomes difficult to see where's the market that's still demanding this book.
Yeah,
and it's meeting that demand that a publisher is trying to achieve.
Yes.
How much control does the author have then if they're going for a trad deal in terms of how the cover looks, for example?
On the cover, yeah, this depends on the publisher and on the author's track record of sales, if they have any. I mean, publishers know that authors would like to be involved in picking the cover of their book. Of course they would. So, I mean, lots of small publishers will give the author, even their debut authors, genuine opportunities to give feedback on possible covers, and they will try to pick a cover that the author likes and approves of. However, the final decision is always going to be the publisher's. And a big publisher, they probably won't give a debut author much or possibly any actual say over the cover. They'll show it to them. But bigger name authors will get consultation and maybe even a limited form of approval on the cover. But again, the final decision is likely to be the publisher's. And that's because I'm afraid there have been occasions where the publisher has been genuinely trying to please the author, but the author says they hate all the covers they've been shown, and then the designer is getting really fed up because they keep being asked to redo the work. And eventually you start to find a danger that the production will be held up. So then pub date would have to be moved, and that would affect the plans for marketing and publicity. Obviously, you want to avoid that kind of situation. So the final decision is the publisher's.
And I think our final question is, are things like what the publishing house can do with a character, are they within the contract?
Well, the publisher is unlikely to do anything with the characters themselves. If they want changes to the characters, to their attributes or to their story arc, they'll ask the author to make those changes at a very early stage. And if they want that kind of change, that would be one of the conditions of acceptance of the manuscript, that the author makes the changes that the commissioning editor has asked for. After that, the editing the publisher will do is copy editing, proofreading, and those don't deal with changes to the character except in terms of keeping it consistent, like keeping the character's eyes the same color throughout, for example.
Yeah, right. I think we've had some questions about that, who have authors who have a particular set of characters, and they're worried about if they go to a trad publishing deal that the publishers will want to change the characteristics of the character, which obviously would be a non-negotiable. But I guess that's the sort of thing that you talk about when you come to sign your contract. You have those conversations, I'm assuming, at the point of when you're first being introduced to the publisher, because just because you're going and talking to a publisher doesn't mean that you're then signing anything. You can walk out from that publishing meeting, I'm assuming, if you don't like what you've discussed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, by the time you get to contract stage, you've probably already had conversations about what sort of changes, if any, they want to make to the book. And if they want something that you are absolutely opposed to doing, you just don't go with that publisher.
Janey, thank you so much for being with us today. If people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So my website is janeyburton.com, and you can get in touch with me on Twitter or Facebook. I will give you all the links to my...
That would be great. Yeah, we'll put everything in the show notes with how to get hold of Janey. And this has been a fabulous episode. Thank you so much, because I think a lot of people are given misinformation and they don't understand. And if any of our listeners out there get to the point where they're signing a contract, then they definitely need someone like Janey to come along and help negotiate their contract to make sure they get the best deal that they can.
Yeah, definitely. It would be my pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Janey. You've touched on things that we've not explored. We're in series 6, and this is the first time we've explored these kind of particular things. And it's just so important for people to understand what they're getting into, and that you do need help and support. If you're starting to look at legally binding things, you need someone who knows what they're doing to show you what
Absolutely.
you need
What
to
to
do.
do. Yeah.
And I do get it's daunting, it's scary and alarming and stuff to read a contract that's got all sorts of responsibilities for you to do, but you don't really understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
Excellent. Thank you, Janey,
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you ever
Yeah.
so much.
Okay.
And next episode is going to be another fabulous guest. We haven't quite decided what order these guests are going to go in. So you're just going to have to wait and see who we're going to be interviewing next week.
I mean, they're all fabulous, so we can always say
exactly.
the
Another
next one's
fabulous. Exactly. Lovely. Thank you very much, Janey, for joining us. And for our listeners, we will be on our next episode coming shortly. So watch out for it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.